Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Transition to Impact, Bringing Research to Practice. To kick things off today, I would like to go ahead and hand things over to Mr. Jerry Laporte, Director to the Office of Investigative and Forensic Sciences with the National Institute of Justice. Jerry?
Thanks, Josh. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, Transition to Impact, Bringing Research to Practice. So this webinar is intended to provide researchers with strategies and tips to help maximize the impact of your research. So today you're going to hear from both experts and peers about the importance of considering how your research can be transitioned into forensic practice. And this should actually be a strategic decision at the beginning of and during your research. And you should always be continually assessing how your research can be transitioned back into practice, even over the course of your research. We look forward to an informative, helpful webinar today, and at this point I'm going to turn it over to Jim Redden from RTI. Jim?
Thanks, Jerry. I'm really excited to moderate today's webinar, and I'm personally very passionate about this particular topic, technology transition, so I'm excited to share kind of what I know and my experiences with it as well. I'm honored to share the virtual stage today with 6 other great presenters. So before we get too far into the content of today's webinar, I want to take a chance to introduce some of the folks that you're going to be hearing from. So as we do these introductions, we're going to go kind of left to right across the screen, and I'd ask each of the presenters listed to introduce yourself with your name and your institution and your role, and then answer one question that will help provide a little bit of context for us. That question is, why are you personally passionate about technology transition? Why is it important to you? So right away, I'm going to turn it back over to Jerry.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jerry Laporte. I'm the Director of the Office of Investigative and Forensic Sciences at the National Institute of Justice. I'd say the main reason that I'm passionate about the idea of transitioning technology is because I actually worked in a laboratory for nearly 18 years, and I would say that one of the worst things to see is like really good research where you can actually improve the accuracy, reliability of what you're doing, but for some reason you can't implement it or get it into your operational environment.
Awesome, thanks. Next up, Jerry Rapero-Miller.
Thanks, Jim. So I am the director for the Forensic Technology Center of Excellence, but here at RTI, I'm also a director for the Center for Forensic Sciences and a senior research forensic scientist. So I've been doing research myself as a forensic toxicologist for over 20 years, and wow, I'd say that in my mind, technology transition is exciting because the research that's done in a laboratory theoretical setting doesn't really become reality until it can be implemented in its intended practical setting. So whether it's in the field or case working or production lab. So to be able to help people demonstrate the value of their research is very rewarding to me.
That's great. All right, Molly Dix.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Molly Dix. I'm a director for the Innovation Advisors Group at RTI. And so if I think about my career over the past 25 plus years, I've helped to transition research, starting with NASA and helping them bring technology they developed back down to Earth, and thinking about the RTI mission, where we're focused on turning knowledge into practice to improve the human condition. That really is the passion of what we're here to talk about today. But going beyond that, I actually want to motivate all of you to really pay attention, because I think in this area, success begets success. So researchers who can show impact are showing return on investment, which helps justify additional investment in the research or the researcher. So being successful here can help you go on to do bigger and better and greater things.
Awesome. Thanks, Molly. I mentioned before, my name is Jim Redden, and I'm also an innovation advisor with RTI International. And since joining RTI, I've just been passionate about the process of bringing new ideas to market. And I'm excited to kind of get to work in that space every day. Okay. In addition to the webinar presenters we just introduced, we are also fortunate because we're going to get to hear some firsthand accounts and advice from some other NIJ R&D awardees who've gone before you. We'll be hearing from Dr. Catherine Gergachek, Dr. Cassandra Calloway, and Dr. Randall Clark later in the webinar. And I'll have the pleasure of conducting a short live interview with each of them. In addition, they're going to be available for Q&A at the end of this webinar. So we're going to save their introductions for their start of their respective interviews coming up. Okay, let's walk through what we have lined up for today. We're going to start by getting everyone on the same page about what we mean when we say transition, and then hopefully expand our understanding about the various types of transition pathways that are available. We'll then get to hear, as I mentioned, from the practitioners, and then after learning from their experiences, we'll give you some tips and tricks for factors to consider to help inspire kind of your transition journey here, and then tell you about some of the resources that are going to be available to support you in this journey. Okay, to start things off, I'm going to turn it back to Jerry to tell us a little bit more about the NIJ.
All right, everyone, just as a quick introduction to what we do here at the National Institute of Justice, or NIJ, we are the Research Development and Evaluation Agency for the Department of Justice. And within NIJ, one of the three scientific offices is the Office of Investigative and Forensic Sciences, of which I'm the director of. We are the federal government's lead agency for forensic science research and development, as well as for the administration of programs that focus on improving laboratory efficiency and reducing backlogs. So we kind of have a dual mission. One of them being focused on research and development, and then the other being focused on providing technical assistance to forensic laboratories throughout the country. Ultimately, though, what we want and need is strong science to support the fair and impartial administration of justice. And we also believe, too, that through research and development, we can positively impact the operations within laboratories. So one of our main missions is to support research in broader scientific fields applicable to forensic science that will lead to the development of highly discriminating, accurate, reliable, cost-effective, and rapid methods for the identification, analysis, and interpretation of physical evidence for criminal justice purposes. So that seems to be a mouthful, but there are a lot of things, a lot of objectives that we have with our research. And we believe that research can somehow have an impact on many of those goals. Now, while there are a number of these goals that can be achieved through rigorous and innovative research, there's undoubtedly a need to develop more robust quantitative approaches to evaluate forensic evidence, which will then strengthen the accuracy and reliability of the conclusions that forensic practitioners reach when they utilize forensic science. So the demand on forensic science laboratories to test evidence also continues to increase. So the forensic science community is also seeking innovative technologies that increase the efficiency at the same time without sacrificing accuracy. And however, we have learned that great research does not always get translated into practice. That's a fact. And therefore, we're with this webinar, we're really just trying to do an outreach campaign and trying to urge researchers to consider how their work might be translated into an operational laboratory. So since 2009, NIJ has supported more than 430 research and development forensic science awards, totaling a little over $206 million. Of course, much of this research has resulted in significantly more knowledge, new and improved methods, and even the implementation of new analytical instruments. But it's now a critical time for us to start realizing those investments in the past 9 years, and by actively facilitating the transition of innovative methods and technologies into practice. And one way for us to do that is through our Forensic Technology Center of Excellence, which Jerry is now going to talk about. Jerry?
Thanks, Jerry. So, as the other Jerry, just wanted to say that the Forensic Technology Center of Excellence was entrusted by NIJ to RTI International in 2011 as the primary or prime organization. And I often get asked at meetings, why RTI? And it's a pretty simple answer for me when I think of RTI's overarching mission of improving the human condition by turning knowledge into practice. We are an independent nonprofit research institute that has been in existence since 1958, so that's 60 years, begin in 2018. Our main campus is in Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, but we have over 5,000 staff members worldwide. I think it's fair to say if there's a research question to ask, RTI probably has someone contributing to the answers. So this graphic is just a basic way of showing RTI's reach for successfully inspiring research translation, because we are, if you will, an in-between organization. We're not an educational institution as our primary purpose, nor are we industry, but we're in between, and we have an overlap with both of these types of organizations that strongly contribute to research. So we have the best of both worlds. And as an applied research institute, RTI is in a great position when it comes to research translation. So as far as the Forensic Technology Center of Excellence, it is committed to improving the practice and strengthening the impact of forensic science through rigorous technology collaborations, evaluations and adoption, effective knowledge transfer and education, and comprehensive dissemination of best practices and guidelines to agencies dedicated to combating crime. Or a way more simple way of putting that is simply we work with NIJ to bring research into practice through a myriad of technology transfer efforts. So as I said, NIJ and RTI work as this is a cooperative agreement for us and our partners. We work with NIJ if need be on a daily basis to work on what we're doing. We are an extension of NIJ, and even with RTI having considerable expertise in forensic science and technology transition, we still can't do it alone. We really need partners. And in 2016, we expanded our partnerships, or our partnering consortiums, to 15 academic and professional organizations. And even still, that's not enough. We kind of need a whole community. So we continue to collaborate with hundreds of state and local laboratories and expert consultants for every activity. And on average, we're doing 40 to 50 activities annually for research translation. So I'm going to pass it back to Jim.
Great. Thanks, Jerry. So now we get to dive into kind of the meat of today's topic, transition. And we're going to start by kind of building a common understanding of what transition means and why it matters. So what do we mean when we say transition? Generally speaking, we can think of transition as anything that moves our research and its associated kind of components into practice in the forensic community. And I'm going to highlight there this word practice. Really, the goal of translating research into practice is to have impact of some kind on the forensics community. And that impact is why we all kind of want to get into the research in the first place, is because we want the discovery to translate to real-world benefits. So transition is really important for the goals that we're trying to achieve. Why now? Why should we think about transition at the beginning and even throughout the process? Oftentimes in my work with universities and other institutions, I hear this statement that transition is something that happens at the end of a project. Why should I start thinking about it kind of at the beginning or throughout? And the reality is that transition requires time and effort and planning. Not only that, the activities that you undertake as a part of that planning can come back and influence the research and make it easier to transition into practice and to have that impact that we all want to have. Okay, let's talk about kind of some of the reasons why transition is so important to this idea of creating impact. On the right here, we have a common diagram that's used in the world of innovation and transition to help us understand the various aspects that influence our ability to take something from the lab and have impact in the respective community for which we are researching, in this case, the forensics community. So there are three elements here, and I'm going to start in the bottom right with this circle labeled feasibility. Feasibility kind of refers to the technical elements of our research, and this is really the bread and butter of most scientists and researchers. They're concerned with a lot of the technical elements of the question and dive into the kind of the research considerations around it. The other two bubbles represent other aspects that are equally important to successful impact for a new innovation. In the top right, we have this bubble called viability. There we're thinking about kind of the business implications of our research if we're going to move it into practice in the community. The example I often like to use is we can have an excellent method, a great new process, but if it costs $5 million for every run of that test, the impact that it's likely to have on the community may be limited because of business considerations. It may just be too expensive to have widespread impact. That's kind of a simple illustration, but when we're thinking about transition for our research, we don't want to ignore some of the different kinds of business considerations that may impact our ability to move our research from the lab into the forensic practice community. This third bubble, labeled desirability here, really talks about the end user, the practitioner considerations for our research. These are the types of questions that will impact what the practicality of and the kind of the benefits to the end user we're hoping will take and use our research, our new methods, our new processes, our new tools in the practice of forensic science in the real world. I'm currently involved in a project that's working to commercialize a miniature mass spectrometer for Duke University. And as part of this project, we looked at the end user considerations of what it means to be portable, to have a portable mass spectrometer that can go out in the field. And I went with the researchers and we talked to some of these practitioners, these end users, and the researchers listened as they described kind of what it means to take something portable in the field. They'd throw it in the back of their pickup truck and they'd drive up and down some dirt roads and it would be jostling around in the back of the pickup bed. And I watched the researchers cringe as they thought of their beautiful new miniature mass spectrometer being bounced around in the back of a pickup truck and expected to work at the end of the day. This element of end user consideration, that desirability, completely changed their conception of what portable meant in the context of their research. And that brings me to the next point of why transition matters. Transition activities undertaken as part of this process can improve the quality of your research. Those researchers with that miniature mass spec example, they went back to the lab and throughout their research funding, they now had a completely new conceptualization of what it meant to be portable and rugged that will increase the likelihood that at the end of their project that the miniature mass spectrometer that they're hoping to deploy will actually be used and make it into practice into the field. So the two main points, transition activities are necessary for our work to have impact. We need to be considering the feasibility, desirability, and viability of all three of these elements. And by doing so, we're going to improve the quality of our research and the likelihood that our work will lead to successful transition and impact in the community. Last but certainly not least, transition, as Molly alluded to earlier, transition success shows impact that future funders are going to value. On the right here, I copy-pasted some of the NIJ research goals, and the point is not to read through every single one, but I pulled out some of those key words there in blue. Things like predict, prevent, and control crime. Things like improve performance, expand use, improve service. All of these phrases are things that are impacting practice. These aren't goals associated with kind of laboratory research. They're goals associated with real-world impact. So by showing this impact through our existing projects, we increase the likelihood that future funders are going to see that and say, wow, this is a worthwhile endeavor, things that I should continue to fund. Okay, so we made a little bit of the case for why transition is important. Now we want to dig into a little bit of what transition might look like. And there's lots of different examples and lots of different considerations for what transition looks like. So to start things off, this is where we get to hear from some of our people who have gone before us, the grantees who have gone before us, with some real-world examples of what transition looks like in their various contexts. So up first, I'm going to introduce Dr. Cassandra Calloway, who's from the Children's Hospital Oakland Research Institute, or CHORI. Dr. Calloway, are you on the line with us here?
I am here. Thank you.
Welcome, welcome. So could we start off, could you tell us a little bit more about your work with CHORI and some of the research activities you're engaged with now?
Great. So over the last 20 years, I've had the opportunity to work on various research projects, and my research is primarily focused on developing new methodology for the most challenging forensic samples, so those that are limited, degraded, or mixed. And some of the earlier work that I had done focused on analyzing mitochondrial DNA markers, and that resulted in several commercial products. And my more recent work that we're doing now is focused on probe capture and next-generation sequencing, and expanding beyond mitochondrial DNA now to include nuclear SNP markers and soon STR markers as well.
That's great. Okay, so in the context of your current work, why should, or based on your experience, why should these folks on this webinar, why should they care about transition? Why is transition important?
I think transition is important because you do a lot of hard work, of course, in your research, and we might publish it and get it out there, disseminating your information through publication or presentation, but it's bringing it to practice that I think is the most rewarding. And initially I had thought I wanted to be a practitioner, so maybe more of an end user, but when I started out and I was involved more in the development of these new methodologies, that's what brought me a lot of reward to see something that we have done put into practice. And I think also looking at my students, it's very motivating, I would say, to see some of the work that they're contributing, that it makes it into practice and into the hands of laboratory practitioners in the field.
That's awesome. Okay, so you've worked on a number of different NIJ projects. Did the transition activities for each of them look the same? And if not, how are the activities different?
I've had the great opportunity to work on many research projects over the years that was NIJ sponsored. Some of the earlier work actually resulted in commercial kit products. So we worked on some screening methods for mitochondrial DNA that ended up into a kit format, and also methodology for Sanger sequencing and expanding that into further analysis to the non-coding and coding regions as well. The more recent work, though, that we are working on in the NGS field, we have taken a slightly different approach because it's not always practical to make a kit because, as you mentioned, some things could be very costly. And so the strategy to get things into practice there is to utilize commercial components, but we have generated or created a a custom set of probes that are then available by order through the vendor. In addition to the methodologies and these types of custom assays and kits, we've also worked with commercial partners to develop software, as well as some academic partners. And so that looked quite different as well. And so for the commercial partners, we helped modify or provided them input, and they modified their existing commercial software. And that we produced a technical note, and so it showed how to utilize it in the field. And from the academic setting, we developed a more open source software and put that available on the web and provided the know-how in order to utilize that. So I think transition can look many different ways, and as a practitioner we maybe think of, or as an end user, it has to be a kit, but that's not always the case, and it's not always practical or feasible to do that. And so thinking about it in other ways, such as a methodology, a technical note, can help bring it into practice as well.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, those are some diverse examples, everything from the kit to the open source software. You mentioned that you have worked with kind of practitioners and commercial partners. How has that work influenced some of the research that you've been doing?
I think it's important, as you mentioned, is not to think at the end, I want to transition this over. You start to think about that even when you're writing the grant, not even maybe waiting to the first year. How would you see this in practice? And for us as an academic environment, we go out and we seek the advice of the practitioners and the commercial partners kind of early on. I've had maybe a different, unique experience having worked in cross each of these fields, but not everyone has that ability. So I would say seek out the partners early, and thinking about in the practitioner standpoint, we could have our best research available, but it may not be practical, and so getting that early input can help change the scope of maybe what you're looking at. For example, we had a screening method for mitochondrial DNA, and it worked very quickly and nicely, but they wanted additional resolution, and so we added a Sanger sequencing component and worked with a practitioner on that standpoint. Early on, we'll put it into the laboratory, so we'll go out and train other practitioners on how to utilize our systems and provide them some reagents to do some testing. And so once it's in their hands, they could give us feedback and help us streamline maybe the process. And as far as thinking of the commercial partners as well, as a researcher, we may have the best ideas, but it may be components may be very costly that we're not really aware of. And so interacting with them early on may help to identify areas that you can adjust rather than at the end, once you have everything done. It's a simple adjustment, maybe making something more stable, for example, by combining two reagents together for chipping or other types of things. And so things that we're not really thinking about as a researcher, I think it's helpful to engage early with these other partners.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so to wrap things up here, based on your experience, what advice would you give to the folks on the line with respect to transition? What's your one piece of advice to leave them with?
I think, as I mentioned, is certainly engaging early on with the practitioners and the commercial partners, and certainly thinking about your system, not only showing feasibility, because once that has been done, it also needs to be optimized and validated, and how developing a plan and thinking about that early on, I think, is really the key to successfully transitioning something from an early research stage that you could put into practice and have the biggest impact.
That's great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Calloway, for your time and for joining us. For the rest of the folks on the line, don't forget we will have a Q&A session at the end where you can ask questions to any of the presenters you hear from today. And so if you have questions along the way and you'd like to have them answered, feel free to put them into the chat window there on the left, and we'll keep track of those and then come back around to those questions at the end. Okay, up next, we're going to hear from Dr. Catherine Gergachek from Rutgers University. Dr. Gergachek, are you on the line with us here?
I am, yep.
Excellent, welcome. So Dr. Gergachek, could you tell us a little bit more about your work at Rutgers and some of your one of your current projects?
Sure. So I'm an associate professor here in the Department of Chemistry at Rutgers University, and over the last maybe 5 to 7 years, we've been working on developing 3 distinct, though related, methods and thus corresponding software programs designed to aid forensic DNA analysis, and in particular autosomal STR analysis. So the first software program or method is called Resolve It. So that is a program that simulates STR electropherograms or STR data. And the reason we wanted to build that is because we wanted to help laboratories decrease the burden during validation. So there was initially always an end goal as we were developing this thing. The next software program is called Knock-It, and that computes a probability distribution on the number of contributors. So that would provide information to the end user pertaining to the most likely number of contributors to the evidence. And then the last program is called Seize It, and that's a continuous software program or method, algorithm, that computes the likelihood ratio, and in addition to that, the likelihood ratio distribution for true non-contributors. So those are the three major projects that we've been involved in.
Interesting. So it sounds like there's a lot of them are kind of software related. So in that sense, what does transition mean for some of these software projects?
Well, transition would mean actually getting the software, getting the user interface designed first of all, because sometimes you can have a really great algorithm, but if you don't have a good user interface associated with it, and it'll be very hard to transition, because the reality is the analysts who are interested in using, or at least testing the software programs or methods that one had developed, they need to be able to interact with it. So I would say consider, if one is developing a software program, really start considering the user interface up front. So transition, friendly transition, I guess, is the thing that I would point to here.
Got it. So what kinds of things did you do to help ensure that the user interface was kind of user friendly? What kind of activities did you undertake?
So initially we just sent out the user interface to, we're at a university, and also I was originally at Boston University as well, so we had access to a lot of students, and they're quite, some of the students are knowledgeable, but they're quite green when it comes to the software. So they're knowledgeable with respect to DNA analysis, or they're in training, I should say. So the first line of attack really was to give them the software and have them go through it and basically record all of their questions, because their questions ended up being quite helpful in terms of establishing whether or not the interface would be friendly to analysts. And then the next thing, of course, I'll echo what Cassandra said, which is really you have to find partners, whether that be other researchers who have been in the field for a while, or partner with the crime laboratory analysts or research departments themselves, and perhaps send over the programs, especially the user interface, to get their input, just to make sure that it's meeting their requirements, because ultimately if we're trying to transition from the research laboratory to the forensic laboratory, it really does need to meet the requirements of the forensic laboratory, not the research laboratory.
Interesting. That's great. Okay, so how did you get connected with some of these forensic laboratories? Do you have any advice if people are like, I want to do that for my project? How do I start?
So luckily I have a good group of collaborators that I do early on, like from previous projects. So they were the first people I called, and I explained to them the idea that we had. And I also explained to them that it was quite early on, and that anything that we would build would be basically not even beta testing, right? These individuals would be alpha testing, the software. So as long as, if you're engaging in a partnership early on, I think it's important to make sure that the partner, the laboratory, understands that this is really in progress. But once you can find those partners that have the time and the resources and the interest to be involved in such a thing, then go ahead and send them whatever it is you have. So really, phone call is the way I approached it.
Great, great. So I'll point out that your Prove It DNA database was recently featured in a story in the Forensic magazine. Can you talk about maybe what impact that article or others like it have had on your work and kind of helping enable some transition through creating awareness?
Oh, I can. That's a great question. Yeah, so the Proved It database is the database of 25,000 lecture fairgrams. So that is available online for free, and we developed that, we released that because we thought it would be important for new, researchers who are interested in testing new algorithms and softwares against currently used algorithms and softwares. We thought that it would be important to have sort of a centralized but independent and freely available database. But to answer your question directly, the media article occurred because our media office here at Rutgers, I contacted them, and then they released the story, and that story was actually picked up. So the media attention associated with the Proved It database was important because what ended up happening was some laboratories then contacted me and asked me to visit with their laboratory and discuss that database. So it does allow for some connection with laboratories that you may not have had connection with before.
Excellent. I think that's a great example of how, it doesn't always require getting out and kind of beating the pavement. There are elements or things that we can do to get the word out about the research that we're doing and spark interest of inbound interest, folks coming to us.
Right.
So Dr. Gurchak, if you were going to leave, just kind of wrap up here, if you're going to leave folks on the line with one piece of advice related to transition to take away, what would it be?
I would say contact your Office of Commercialization if you have one early on, because they'll be able to help you and give you some relatively good advice regarding commercialization, but also the commercialization process for your specific institution, because of course especially larger institutions, they typically have their own Office of Commercialization, so they would have to be involved in any endeavor. So contact them early and get them involved if you indeed have one.
That's a great teaser, because we're going to be hearing from Molly Dix a little bit later with some tips for engaging with those tech transfer offices. So thank you, Dr. Gurchak. And as a reminder to the folks on the line, if you have questions specifically for Dr. Gurchak, feel free to pop them into the chat window, and we'll come back to a live Q&A here at the end of the webinar. Great. So up next, we have our last practitioner here, Dr. Randall Clark from Auburn University. Dr. Clark, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Good day, everyone.
So Dr. Clark, tell us a little bit about your work there at Auburn and your current project.
Sure. I'm a professor of medicinal chemistry in the School of Pharmacy at Auburn. Our research work and our projects deal with what we call forensic drug chemistry. The work is concerning isomer issues in synthetic drug species where a number of structural possibilities are likely to exist based on commercially available isomeric precursor chemicals. These molecules share a number of mass-based properties, and in many cases the mass spectra are very similar or essentially identical. Our studies are essentially a mixture of organic synthesis and analytical sciences where we evaluate these possibilities, quite often all of the possibilities in these isomeric situations, and look for ways to resolve the issues of determining exactly which isomeric form of a given elemental composition that is available in that particular drug structure.
Interesting. So in the context of that work, does the transition kind of look like is it a method? Would you try to push out kind of a new product to the market? What does transition look like for this work?
Well, transition to me and to us first is to make the practitioner aware of these possibilities and these issues that in many cases a particular analytical result that was useful in identifying a natural product which only comes in one isomeric form might not be sufficient to specifically identify a material that is one of the synthetic chemicals that comes from totally synthetic drug-type molecules. So providing the basic science information is certainly important in those kinds of things. The analytical issues in some of these cases, a number of drug categories require some new methods or certainly some new thinking about eliminating possibilities that hadn't necessarily been considered in other situations.
Interesting. So it sounds like there's a fair amount of kind of knowledge transfer that you're hoping to get into or out to practitioners.
Yes.
What activities kind of have you undertaken to kind of help with this knowledge transfer process?
Well, certainly and in an academic institution, as the other presenters, Cassandra and Catherine have mentioned, we certainly want to publish our results as fast as we can in appropriate journal articles. We also try our best to give talks at, one of the best ways is to give talks at state and regional meetings where forensic scientists gather. In the past, we've attempted to summarize some of our work for the microgram publication, and certainly microgram does a good job in listing publications that might be of interest to practitioners. We have given CE talks at again, regional and state meetings, and those kinds of things are the way that we have attempted to get the information at least in front of the practicing forensic scientist who quite often spends all their time working casework and doesn't have a chance to do and look at some of the things that are on the horizon or that are the coming issues.
Interesting. So in your interactions with these practitioners at these state and regional meetings, did any of those conversations kind of come back and benefit your research or inform your research in new ways?
Oh yes, that's one of the things that I think you've heard from the other two speakers in this particular segment of the webinar, and that is this transition process is truly a two-way process. You, if you're prepared to get some really constructive criticism, constructive ideas that can be criticism, go and make the presentations, and you'll be you will definitely, the person such as me will definitely benefit from that because you begin to be able to meld together what your thoughts were and what the needs are and to find a way to accomplish both of those situations.
Awesome. Yeah, that's definitely true. One of the popular things in Silicon Valley is that no minimum viable product survives its first contact with the practitioners. So we certainly have experienced that before. That's great. So Dr. Clark, what would be your kind of one key piece of advice for the folks on the webinar with respect to transition?
Well, clearly, if you are outside the forensic laboratory system, as am I and as are the other speakers here, make a contact within, find a way to get some feedback, talk to an individual within the system, offer to be involved in some way to make it mutually beneficial to them, and then grow from there. I've been fortunate in that I've always had that contact here and been able to develop as a result of that. But getting inside the system and learning what the issues are and learning how your idea or your project can be useful to the practitioner is a very important point.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. Clark, for your time and insights here. And we'll look forward to getting some questions to you at the end from the audience.
Sure.
This is great. Okay, so we've heard from the front lines kind of some of the different forms that transition takes, everything from knowledge transfer to productized kits. So we're going to cover just a couple. I'll put a couple up here for you to consider. And these are not an exclusive list. The goal here is to broaden the scope of our thinking about what form transition could take and kind of what it might mean. And it's a very contextual decision. You must reflect on your own project and what it means to impact forensic practice in your area of research. But one form is certainly validation. And why? Why is validation important for our research? Well, as I mentioned before, moving from the lab to the field always is going to present some unexpected barriers. And the sooner you can identify those barriers from conversations with practitioners, I think we've heard from our guests that it's really an invaluable part of kind of learning and preparing our research for that transition. So what kinds of questions might we ask? In what ways might validating with real-world conditions or users identify improvements that we could make to our research? Another form that transition often takes, as Dr. Clark mentioned, is knowledge transfer. As researchers, we're constantly discovering new things, and there's a certain amount of knowledge that we're generating. And it's important because it's important to transition this knowledge and plan for how to transition this knowledge. Otherwise, our research kind of sits on a shelf and can't impact the community. So we can think about questions like, what is my knowledge transfer plan, or what activities beyond publication could I use to engage my intended audience? Who could I contact in order to get the word out about kind of my research to various media outlets? Good thoughts for your planning process. And then last but not least, there is true technology transfer, technology commercialization, where we may interact with the tech transfer offices at our university or develop products or services that can be transferred into commercial opportunities. So why? Well, why think about this at the beginning? Well, new technologies or processes need these viable business models in addition to the technical benefits and the end-user desirability considerations in order to be successful. So thinking about that from the beginning can help us set us up for success there. So a question you might ask yourself, how am I going to transition this novel technology in a way that supports the formation or integration into a viable business? And they're interacting both with the tech transfer office and with the commercial entities in our communities can provide valuable insights to those questions. All right. So transition takes many forms, but none of these forms happen on their own. They're all going to require kind of effort and planning and strategic thinking on our part that is a part of our research process from the very beginning. Okay, just as a kind of recap, remember we talked about the 3 different elements that we should think about when considering kind of the factors that are going to impact transition. Certainly the technical feasibility is something we're all very familiar with and concerned with. But as transition planning occurs, let's not forget the human elements, the desirability, the practitioner considerations, and integrating with those practitioners to get feedback on our research. And then if commercialization is a part of our transition plan, thinking through the various business elements, the business viability of some of our work, and what that might mean for the way we shape our research agenda. Okay, moving on. So we've talked about kind of the broad different types of transition pathways. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Molly Dix, who's going to talk a little bit more about some of the factors that we can think about as we're considering these elements to create a successful transition.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks to all of the PIs who shared their stories. This is one of those topics where somehow it always sounds easy when you talk about it, but the reality is it's hard work day in, day out, It's putting yourself in uncomfortable positions, like you said, testing value propositions where you learn maybe it's not as cool as you thought it was. Other people don't see it that way. So I think the key thing we want to think about here is, and I need to, Josh, hang on. There we go. That it's really about what value are you bringing, and is it greater than the cost? And so when we think about cost in the setting of forensics, especially, like Dr. Clark, where it might be knowledge transfer, knowledge might seem free, but in the end, it's really not immune to the cost-value equation. Even free items, require input by the user in terms of learning. It could be some kind of practice change within a lab. These have cost, and so are you bringing a value to that end user that's greater than the cost? So what we want to really think about is who could benefit from my research. So to think about value, you have to think about, well, to who? And so one of the analogies I like to use, just because it's simple and we can all understand and connect to it, is dating. So, are your end users, do you think that you want a data supermodel? Do you want a lifelong companion? Or are you looking for somebody who's really funny and is going to make you laugh? They're totally different. And what you bring to attract them, are you a supermodel yourself? Do you look great? Or are you really funny? Or are you okay being teased? That might be material for somebody who's going to laugh. So it's not just what you bring, but it's who are you targeting and what do they need? So how well do I know what's important to them? And what are their current challenges? So who are they currently dating and why is it not working? It's the exact same thing in transition. You have to understand your value, to whom, for what. There it is, and for what purpose. And these things sound easy, but understanding value proposition, especially from a researcher's perspective where you're just really trying to improve something and make it better, it's actually a lot harder than it sounds. It takes consideration of where you're going and why, and really that prioritization of what direction to investigate and understand most in your transition, not just your research. So when thinking about that competing solutions, I'm trying to be better. Am I trying to be better at accuracy, reliability, cost, speed, other? For all of these, there's a level set of the current status quo. How much better do I actually have to be for somebody to incur the switching costs to put the investment into adopting my technology? And that starts all the way at the beginning of even just testing. We heard some talk from the panelists about, you have to make them understand they're not even beta, they might be alpha. And that's kind of almost asking them to do that out of the goodness of science and progression and improving towards real adoption, because they're not even a beta, they're an alpha. And are they in it with you to help you get there? So functionally, in this world of innovation today, whether it's in forensic science or anywhere else, innovation has become an open science. You can't do it alone. And if you do, you'll probably get down a pathway where you are, you don't have the pieces in place in terms of meeting the user needs or even supply chain connections within networks. You can't do it alone. And so who should you be working with from the very beginning to help you meet your technical challenges, your funding challenges, and ultimately meet those user needs? And it's a pretty complicated web when you think about it in that many variables. So coming back to the framework that Jim introduced, it's really about where you are. You're trying to improve the science and move it towards transition. And thinking back to that key element, ask yourself the questions, where are my barriers? Maybe technically I'm doing fine, but I'm not really connected to my users, and I think I'm going to finish this research and really not have anything to do but publish. Okay, so are you really bringing the value you could? Maybe it's time to start connecting to users and think about who might adopt it and how. Or is it, I am creating a system that there's going to need to be peripheral supplies, and I've not thought about or connected to anybody about who might provide those supplies, how expensive they might be. So it's ask yourself those questions in these three directions in terms of where are my barriers and who might help me to overcome those barriers. Okay, so I'm going to hand it back to Jim at this point.
Okay, so we're going to talk about some tips for success. Hopefully you're not feeling too overwhelmed with all the different factors that are involved in successful transition. Fear not, there are some resources available to help you. First up, I'm going to hand it to Jerry to talk about what the FTCOE can do to help support you.
Thanks, Jim. So the first tip for success, I think, was echoed in pretty much every speaker's talk today, and it's just that pretty much it's impossible to do tech transfer alone. While you may have built in a dissemination plan when you were writing your proposal, or you have thought about doing your dissemination once you near the end of your research or even complete your research, and think more along the lines of what to do, you really shouldn't stop at the traditional publications and presentations and going to conferences to do networking, because while those are great ways to begin tech transfer, they're limited. So I think all of us have stressed the fact that you can't stop there. You need to go further. And the FTCOE is NIJ's investment in furthering their research and what they support. So I really do invite you, if you haven't had a chance to work with the FTCOE, maybe you've only been able to utilize their resources more as a practitioner or a researcher, but you haven't actually used what we do for yourself and for your own research. I encourage you to learn about the FTCOE through our website or giving us a call or an email, and not only reaching out to RTI's Center for Forensic Sciences or our innovation advisors that do tech transfer, but our various partners, and even reaching back to NIJ and the grant managers, because oftentimes they've been working in their portfolios, so they know a lot of people to help you interact and network with. Gotta find my little mouse here. It's not wanting to go. Okay, I went too far. Okay, so another thing is to say that while there's 7 bullets here to talk about some of the deliverables or resources that the Center of Excellence provides, these are merely just the beginning or examples. So whether it's to help you with planning, at least once a year, the Center of Excellence sends out an inquiry to all the R&D awardees to not only find out what you're doing to be your own champion for your research, but to ask those questions of, where do you find limitations, or where do you have those barriers that you just don't know the direction to go in, and we will reach out to you and help with planning and coming up with ideas that maybe you haven't really thought of, or you've thought of them but you don't know how to necessarily implementing them. We do a lot of webinars. We have hundreds of webinars that are all about knowledge transfer on our website, and we're continuously working with the practitioners and researchers to not only talk about the research itself, but even at the beginning of your research where you don't actually necessarily have results, but you want to have some type of webinar where you can bring people together that are interested in the topic that you're considering, more in a conversational type of webinar where discussions can go on, you can ask questions, and you can get that constructive criticism, or somebody may pop up during that webinar that may end up being one of your collaborators in the future. Reports and events, we go to many of the conferences that you go to, so look when you're going to your next conference to see if we're available. We just started this past year with Just Science podcast, and we have more than, I think it's up to like 6,000 following us on our weekly podcast. So this is another newer way of us helping with that knowledge transfer, and just direct outreach and additional workshops. So those are just some ideas. I encourage you to think of other ideas, and then we we really do work with you to figure out what's your best mechanism, because I think you've heard, again, from everyone that there's just not one pathway for tech transfer, and you've got to keep making it dynamic and looking at ways to do tech transfer. And I think I'm passing it back off to Molly.
Yes, indeed. So one reminder is that at RTI and with our partners, there's a lot of different potential support. So within FTCOE, the two major parts of RTI are the Center for Forensic Science. Those are folks who are forensic researchers and scientists and can help with things like technical evaluation. So finding partners in labs to actually test and see the reality of what it's like to move that technology into the user. We've done those kinds of things. One example I'll share is where, similar to the example Jim was using, a researcher had developed a ruggedized instrument because they had used military-grade electronics and so on and so forth. But when we supported the actual evaluation in a lab, it was really things like how you loaded samples where they were inconsistent. And so from a scientific perspective, the science, they couldn't trust the results because the actual process of using the equipment had issues. So that was really good feedback back to the PI and could go back and redesign how just samples were loaded, something that simple. So there's technical folks that can find partners for testing and evaluation. Jim and I are part of the Innovation Advisors team. We're much more about the value to whom for what and helping enable those kinds of conversations and support. And so when we think about the spectrum beyond the FTCOE, your tech transfer office, if you have one, is a fantastic resource. And what I'm gonna talk to is a little bit the reality of engaging with your tech transfer office. So we already heard from one of the PIs, go to them. Don't wait for them to come to you. And I'm going to say, even when you go to them, it's very hard to get their attention, and especially in the direction of forensic science. And there's a reason. Their goal quite often is about licensing technology. And so when you think about licensing technology, there's often an economic impact variable that guides their work every day. So when they think about where to put their resources and time, they're typically looking at the size of the opportunity, and their main lens is dollars. Well, forensic science, in many cases, is not about dollars. It's really about the impact to society that it brings. And if you can help them get to that point of, one, knowing you're really committed, that you're not going to go away, that you're serious about needing their help, or you're going to go do it on your own, but you really need their help to do it the right way for the institution, you can get their attention. It's a little bit of a squeaky wheel. If you can show them that this is going to have a great story back to the institution, you can bring them on board. And once they're on board, they're really excellent champions. But they're busy people, and if they're chasing a multi-million-dollar pharmaceutical deal, it might take some effort on your part to get their attention. And I will tell you, the FTCOE, we have helped researchers actually get the attention of their tech transfer office. We've sat in on telecons and meetings with their tech transfer office to help everybody get on the same page to understand what does success look like, how might we move forward, what kind of help do we need from them, their tech transfer. Maybe we only need them to help get the patents filed, and then the FTCOE can actually help with the transition because they don't have the time. So again, we can kind of be the advocate and maybe the accelerant that drives those conversations. And we have done that successfully in the past. The first call is usually a little awkward because they're like, you're who and you're here why? But once they understand that NIJ supports us to help drive this progress, then everybody's good with it and knows we're all pulling in the same direction. Okay, so when we think about going forward, we've heard, there's knowledge transfer, there's new products. Sometimes it's both. Often knowledge transfer can be an equation or part of driving new products. Some people have tech transfer, extensive tech transfer support. Others have very little. So how might the FTCOE help you depending on where you are on the spectrum? So If you don't have a tech transfer office and you're really looking just to get the word out, maybe it's to accelerate interest for partnerships, we can help, as Jerry said, with things like webinars or knowledge transfer workshops, podcasts, so that you can drive the conversation in a direction with the community so that you can make connections to help you move forward. Or we might help develop and test the value proposition with end users by, those connections to industry, or even if it's something that needs to become a startup and be a business to, let's say, provide a kit. We can help find either entrepreneurial support or funding if you're that entrepreneur. So, that's pretty varied. Now, if you have a tech transfer office, as we mentioned, then we can help you by, in some cases, we've actually done some of the marketing materials for the tech transfer office so that we could get the word out to potential partners. And again, you can drive that equation with webinars, workshops, podcasts. And the final would be if you're really trying to have a new product and you do have a tech transfer office, we can help them drive towards finding partners for licenses, having discussions with those partners for licenses, because a lot of the partners are actually in the forensic community, and we can connect to those equipment providers and software providers, whereas your tech transfer office really doesn't have those connections. Okay, with that, I'd like to turn it back to Jerry Laporte.
All right, thanks, Molly. So you've now heard from my fellow panelists with respect to the importance of technology transition and some of the efforts that are underway, particularly through our Forensic Technology Center of Excellence. Ultimately, though, technology transition and potential commercialization is something researchers should always be thinking about, depending on the type of research you're engaged in. I think you've heard that from all of the speakers today. I also want to take this opportunity to make you aware of a new program that we recently introduced to connect postgraduate researchers with publicly funded forensic laboratories. So it's kind of, if you will, trying to feed the pipeline, if you will, to make researchers more aware of the operational needs within a laboratory. So you can kind of think of this as almost like a matching program where we have laboratories that are seeking undergrad or postgraduate researchers in specific research projects, and then that information is provided on the website, and then the potential postgraduate researcher can then reach out to the laboratory directly. What it is it started off as a postdoctoral fellowship program, and then we've been sort of tweaking it over the past year, but it's part of our research and evaluation for the testing and interpretation of physical evidence in publicly funded forensic laboratories program. And what we do through that solicitation is we encourage applicant laboratories to consider funding a postgraduate, whether that's master's or doctorate, as part of their proposals. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring together, facilitate researchers and practitioners in an environment where the researcher can understand some of the challenges and hurdles that may be encountered when they're trying to do their research and thinking about how that research would translate into an operational laboratory. So we've created this web page that provides leads for anticipated research opportunities, and then there's labs that are listed in there that have expressed an interest in connecting with postgraduate researchers under this specific program. So what we are doing is, I think right now, or as of today, we have at least eight laboratories that have expressed interest in this. But we're thinking of trying to grow this program a little bit more over the next year. It'll be permanent on our website, and it won't be just specific for this solicitation. So while this matching program is in its very early stages, we anticipate kind of expanding and promoting it more in making making researchers more aware of it, and of course forensic practitioners. So by facilitating these connections, we hope this effort will afford the researchers and practicing forensic scientists with an opportunity to collaborate, which will hopefully lead to research that will have a practical impact in an operational laboratory. This is kind of in line with what Dr. Calloway had spoke about with respect to working with practitioners. So at this point, I just want to thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Jim.
Awesome. Thanks, Jerry. Okay, so at this point, we're going to recap and then move to the Q&A portion where you guys get the chance to ask some questions to the panelists. So as a brief recap, we talked in the beginning about why transition is important, and specifically why it's important to start early and continue with these activities throughout. And we heard firsthand accounts and kind of the same message over and over, reiterating the value of these activities to your research in general. We talked about kind of different transition pathways from knowledge transfer to validation activities and even commercialization and interacting with your tech transfer office. And then we provided some factors to consider and some tips for success. So we've got now, I think, about 20 minutes left, which is great, for some Q&A with our panelists. So if you have specific questions for specific panelists, go ahead and pop those into the chat window in the bottom left. And we have a couple questions already from the audience that we'll go ahead and kick things off with. So the first question comes from Lori Ann Bromberg, and she says, I'm a practitioner in drug chemistry engaged in research. Does a forum or platform exist that can connect me with potential collaborators? It's a great question, and I'm going to direct that question to Dr. Jerry Rapero-Miller, and then I believe Dr. Calloway would like to chime in as well.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Jim. So I think that Jerry Laporte actually gave a really good resource that just became available last year through the NIJ, and it sounds like it's getting underway, getting started, and really it's exactly for, in some respects, what you're asking for as far as being a post-research website where you can pick up on collaboration. For the FTCOE, one of our objectives given to us by the NIJ is to help them with their R&D portfolio management.
To message your medical providers, look up past and future appointments,
by doing this,
request
we do exactly what you're asking.
and view some of your
Reach out to
diagnostic
us,
testing results.
look at your research and see how we can help you make those connections beyond you're already in a good position. You're already being your own champion with the activities that you've expressed that you're doing with LinkedIn and going to conferences and meeting people that way, but we can just help identify and kind of do that matching for you. And I'm also aware that the American Society of Crime Lab Directors Research Committee is again working on a website and portfolio of helping industry partners and academic partners be able to make those matches with practitioner labs that are interested in the same areas of research or technology that they're doing. So those are three that I'm aware of.
Okay, that's great. The next question, and Jerry, I think I'm going to pass this one back to you as well to start, comes from Joanne Segelia. In addition to transitioning a method or technology, one must consider the QA aspects. How does one close the gap from developing a method and potential to commercialize alongside with what standards labs must address in order to keep compliance with accreditation? What are the controls, experience, education, training, competency, and proficiency testing that may often lag for newer methods? And I think here's the crux of the question. How does this group work to close such a gap for forensic scientists to actually use the method?
Okay, so and I'll invite Molly to join in on this too if she has any additional things. So as far as methodology and working for proficiency testing and everything, we probably do it on a more of a case-by-case basis. I wouldn't say that this is something that we just look at the grand forensic disciplines and try to do it for every single one. It really is those efforts that we have done has been through somebody reaching out to us and saying that this is a concern for them, and we've helped with things like, for instance, looking at hair testing and drugs of abuse and hair testing and trying to find PT or quality control samples for that. We got a call saying that an individual could not find that and was looking for it for some of the research that they were looking at doing. And so we worked with them to identify some commercial availability of that, and then what's out there in the literature. So it really is, I would say, a case-by-case basis that we work on doing those kind of connections.
And I will just add to that I think for that kind of, when standards are involved, it's really about considering the stakeholders. Often it can even be all the way back to the standards committee to understand their pathways and processes, their connections. And so, again, like Jerry said, I think it's very case by case. You know, where are you trying to go, and what are you trying to even maybe displace, and why? And who are the stakeholders who can help either, you know, help you understand the barriers to getting there or help be the accelerants to get there.
Hey, Jim, this is Jerry Laporte. I just wanted to chime in here too as well. I think what Joanne's asking is first of all an excellent question, but I think the one thing that we can't forget, and this is coming from a guy who worked in an operational laboratory too, is that there has to kind of be a two-way street here. So the lab needs to be able to embrace the idea of bringing in new methodologies as well. So you can't just leave it all up to the researcher to figure out how to do everything, and sort of, you know, working in the standards world too is a little more difficult, but it also sort of, you know, the lab has to be engaged as well and has to want to, you know, try and strive at least for better, more efficient methods or whatever that may be, you know, implementing a new technology, going through the validation process, understanding that there's a commitment that you have to train your personnel, that you have to maintain the new equipment. So there's a whole host of those things as well, too, to consider.
Okay, great. Dr. Calloway, what do you think in terms of the context of a DNA test?
I would say in the context of a DNA test, we're thinking about these things when we're developing the assay, and there's certain guidelines that we must follow, and so we start to do the developmental validation, and then we work with some of the practitioners in helping them with their internal validation. So we have gone out and done training, formal training through such things as like the CCI, the California Criminalistics Institute, or been invited directly in to help train the laboratories in interpretation or how to utilize our assays. In regards to proficiency, we've also provided samples for proficiency testing for some of the laboratories that we have developed some of these more custom assays.
Great, thank you. So there's another question here about the costs associated with the webinars and seminars that are available through the FTCOE, and I'll broaden the question a little bit to say, you know, are there costs to the researchers for the support that was described from the FTCOE?
I can take that
and
one.
I'll pass that one to Jerry.
Yeah, so what's great about the Center of Excellence is because of NIJ's investments, every resource that everything that we do as a Center of Excellence really is at no cost to the researchers or to the end users. So the webinars are at no cost. And when I say no cost, you're not paying for our services. There may be costs to you for doing a webinar as far as your time and commitment for doing the webinar, but as far as us charging you for our services, there's no fees there. And that's broader than more just than webinar. Like I said, it's all of our resources.
Excellent. So if you need help with your tech transfer office, that gets wrapped into that kind of umbrella services as well. So certainly a very great resource. We've got a question from Igor Lednev, It says, from the University of Albany, says, in the case of a new technology is developed is based on instrumentation, which is not evaluable in crime laboratories currently. Is there support for purchasing new equipment for crime laboratories to validate and implement the new methodology? I'm not sure who's best to answer that one, so I'll let folks chime in who think they want to address it.
Hey, Jim, this is Jerry Laporte. I can address that. So, yeah, first of all, great question from Igor. We do have a specific program for exactly what Igor has, his question pertains to, and it's called the Research and Evaluation for the Testing and Interpretation of Physical Evidence in Publicly Funded Forensic Laboratories. So we developed this solicitation a couple of years ago as part of our transition, or part of our plan to try and get more impact in laboratories. That solicitation does allow a laboratory to purchase new equipment, validate it, and actually compare it with other technologies in the laboratory. So it's sometimes we like to sort of characterize this more of as a business process evaluation, where you're looking at whether a new technology can actually increase efficiency within a laboratory, or if you're getting better accuracy with it. So that program is designed specifically for that. And then also we have the Paul Coverdell Forensic Science Improvement Grants, where labs get a formula distribution every year, and they can use that money to purchase new equipment and then validate it as well.
Great. Jerry, could you repeat both of those solicitations one more time in case people were taking notes?
Yep. The first one is called Research and Evaluation for the Testing and Interpretation of Physical Evidence in Publicly Funded Forensic Laboratories. And I can tell you right now that solicitation is open right now, and I believe it closes, I don't know, in the next week or so. And then the other one is the Paul Coverdell Forensic Science Improvement Grants.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Okay, so I think that's all the questions currently from the audience. There are a couple more minutes if you want to get your questions in. In the interim, I've got a question kind of going back to Dr. Clark. So Dr. Clark, in our interview, you mentioned kind of presenting at local research chapters and kind of professional societies. How did you make those presentations happen if someone is not currently connected or presenting through these outlets but wants to get involved? How did you go about doing that?
Sure. Well, I can't really, we have always had a very close relationship with our forensic drug chemistry laboratory in the Department of Forensic Science here, so I think I've always had that kind of invitation, but clearly I think the beginning of that was me making a contact with someone in the practitioner forensic science laboratory here and asking about having them come and help me apply a technique that they didn't have, and finding a way to create that relationship, and then going and visiting with them and talking about that. And clearly, if you don't have that relationship already, if you find someone in that forensic laboratory who does something similar to what you're doing, you can make that contact and make those presentations. As far as local and regional chapters of forensic science organizations such as SAS and SWAFs and those other regional organizations, if you find the program director for this year's meeting or next year's meeting, they're generally looking for presentations, and you can usually get on the program without having to travel too far and go and make a presentation and get started dealing with specifically the practitioners in your particular field of interest.
Great advice, great advice. Okay, for the last question for the panelists, I'm going to direct it back to either Jerry or to Molly. But let's say somebody's attended this webinar and is super enthusiastic and wants to get in touch with the FTCOE to take advantage of some of these resources and some of the support that they can provide in transition planning. What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
So on one of the slides, I actually had my email address, but I'm going to say it again. I think the best thing would be to send me an email, or I'll even give you a phone number. It's pretty simple, dix@rti.org. It's probably the best email address anybody could have, 9 letters. dix@rti.org, and the phone number you can reach me at is 919-541-5866, and absolutely don't be shy. Please call. We will, at a minimum, give you some advice. Your call is actually beneficial because it helps us understand the kinds of needs that researchers have, and hopefully we can chart a path forward where we can help you get where you need to go.
Excellent. Thanks, Molly. So I captured it and I included her contact information in the chat window for those of you who are looking for it. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up here. Thank you so much today to all of our presenters who have shared their insights with us. It's been great, and thank you for your questions. As we wrap up here, if you could take a couple minutes and click on this link right here in the middle of the presentation, what we have is an opportunity for folks to provide some feedback to us on this particular webinar. This feedback is essential in making sure that the content stays relevant to you and your needs, as well as provides us with important information as we continue to serve kind of the forensics community here. In addition, I'm going to point out down here in the bottom left, there's a little files box that has opened up. If you would like a copy of the slides from today, you can double click on this that icon there and it should download a copy of today's presentation. With that, thank you everybody for attending, and if you have any final questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box here. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day.